Hey everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And you are exceptionally welcome to our ongoing conversation about how to use culture in order to build empathy. We are social science researchers with 2 PhDs who are completely convinced that curiosity can change the world. And we hope to cultivate that within you by talking about culture, both popped and lived, in ways in order to encourage curiosity and build empathy. We talk about everything from exactly why people care so much about flags. It's a thing, y'all. To words you really can't use anymore and what you should use instead. To trying to figure out what Bruce Miller is doing on The Handmaid's Tale. It really runs the gamut. We have conversations with each other about this all the time. As we often joke, we'll be happy to show you the screenshots, but we love to talk with you as well. So however you are encountering this media, we would love to hear your thoughts and comments on our thoughts and comments.
This video is a part of our ongoing coverage of Disney Plus's Marvel's universes, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier season 1, which premiered on Disney Plus, who knows, some time ago, sometime in 2021.
May 2021, that feels right.
Who knows? Who knows time anymore? It's on Disney Plus. If you haven't watched it, why are you watching us? No, I'm kidding.
Just kidding. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome either way. But we're talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier because a lot of the way that we feel we can have conversations about empathy and inclusivity is by looking at and discussing popular culture and media production. We usually focus on stories by and about women, but you know what? We found a lot of hits happening within the Falcon and the Winter Soldier when we watched it the first time, and we decided to do something that brings us infinite levels of joy after we slogged through season 4 of The Handmaid's Tale. So that's why we are where we are. We are up to episode 2 entitled Star Spangled Man. And whoo, do we have some stuff to talk about. If you're just joining us, maybe you heard about our episode 1, you haven't seen us before. Hi, you're very welcome. We're not doing a blow by blow recap. There's great places to look for that elsewhere. We would point you to our friends at Vulture, whom we will rely on heavily to remind us what happened in these episodes. We're going to do bigger discussions about themes and character developments and story arcs and the like. So if that's what you like, you're very welcome. Join us to talk about the Star Spangled Man, which is basically like the Bucky it's like
and the Sam Lethal Weapon episode.
Yeah, it's where we always knew Bucky and Sam could be, which is this like buddy cop comedy duo. And boy, do we get a lot of it. We also get introduced to John Walker, who is the new Captain America. We affectionately call him Discount Cap or Low-Cal Cap. We've got lots of nicknames for him that aren't Captain America because he's not our Captain America. But we meet John Walker. We learn a little bit about his background in military service. We meet his
wife, even though we're never ever told her name.
Never told her name.
Hey, way to be on brand, Marvel.
Hey, Marvel.
Way to be on brand. Way to be on brand.
Marvel and women is a whole other series that we maybe will talk about another time, but we don't really have time now. We also meet his friend, bestie, Lamar. Lamar and Nameless Wife are 2 Black folks, also keeping in track with the way Marvel does sidekicks or companions. But we learn a bit about John Walker, why he wants to be Captain America and what's motivating him. And then we also get to see Lamar and John spar off several times throughout the episode as Bucky and Sam join forces to try and find the Flag Smashers. And then Discount Cap jumps in to try and be Captain America all over it. And he's not good at it, y'all. He's not good at it. So that's the guts of the first part of the episode. Once Sam and Bucky are done faffing around with the Flag Smashers, they come back to Baltimore to meet someone we have not yet encountered in the visual filmed Marvel universe, a man named Isaiah Bradley, whom we learn from Isaiah was like the Black Captain America. He was given super serum. He fought along Captain America. He tells us he fought Winter Soldier at one point in 1951. And
Bucky fought everybody.
Everybody. And then we did what we do in America. We incarcerated a Black man. So we sent him to prison and spent 30 years experimenting on him. And nobody ever knew about him. Captain America, like Steve didn't know about him.
Steve was in the ice.
Sam doesn't know about him. Nobody knows about Isaiah. So lest we thought, you know, the hint of the first scene dealing with race when Sarah and Sam go to try and get a loan was the only thing they were going to do. No. They're pretty much laying down the gauntlet and saying, would you like to talk about systemic racism? Because we would like to talk about systemic racism, and we're going to do it now. So that's the guts of what happens in this episode, and we have a lot to say about it. So Dr. Kristen.
I would just like to give a Fandom Corner update here that when John...
Please, can we call it Fandom Corner?
Sure, yeah.
Coming to you from Fandom Corner.
Coming to you from Fandom Corner. When John Walker first said the name Bucky, immediately I screamed, like without prompting, get his name out of your mouth. That is not your name for him. My sweet husband refers to this show as, are we watching Your Boyfriends, when we were watching them every Friday night. And so when it happened, he like hit pause and he turned to me and goes, do you need a minute? And I was like, he doesn't get to call him Bucky.
Call him Bucky.
Bucky is the friend name. Like
no, Sam doesn't even call him.
Sam eventually calls him Bucky.
Calls him
Mostly
Bucky,
calls him
like,
Barnes.
But Sam doesn't really call him Bucky.
I mean, nobody calls him James, so like that's fine. We have a James with Rhodey, so it's fine.
It's fine. But yeah, no.
But yeah,
that's so
I was
funny.
like, get his name out of your mouth.
Also, I'm going to talk directly to our video editor now, because please, can you make a like Fandom Corner banner for Dr. Kristen for when she talks about it? Thank you so much. Back to the episode.
So like from that perspective, that was incredible. I knew Isaiah Bradley because in all of we had a long time to talk about Falcon and Winter Soldier as a fandom, a long time.
We knew
because of the COVID.
We knew it was coming, and then it didn't.
And at one point, Carl Lumley's casting was leaked. And somebody, a very intrepid person on Tumblr, was like, guys, I will bet you $400 that he's playing Isaiah Bradley. And so I read that a little bit of that comic run at one point last summer when I was getting into comics. Shout out to everybody who's helped me hold my hand through that process, because it's overwhelming. And was fascinated by essentially what Isaiah Bradley is Marvel's answer to the Tuskegee experiment, which if you don't know what the Tuskegee experiment is, because that's something that I'm going to guess a lot of non-Americans and a lot of Americans probably don't know about. So we're going to link the official Center for Disease Control, because it was run by them, the Center for Disease Control article about it in our show notes, but there are incredible documentaries about it. It's very, very well known, but essentially too long, didn't read. The United States government needed to figure out what syphilis did, specifically, and like what to do with it. Needed. I'm using air quotes around needed. And essentially took a whole lot of Black men who had syphilis and, or then gave them syphilis if they didn't have it, experimented on them, tortured them. It was all really terrible all along while we had a treatment for syphilis called penicillin. And syphilis, if you don't know, is a sexually transmitted disease that if it goes untreated, it actually eats away at your brain.
Yep.
And it's pretty much what we think caused the madness of King George. And it literally just eats away at your brain. And so these men were tortured. It obviously came out much later than when it happened, which was in the 50s. And the Tuskegee experiment is often a shorthand for the way the United States government has medically treated Black men in particular. Henrietta Lacks is the shorthand for how we've treated Black women.
Right.
Gynecology is a shorthand for how we've treated Black women.
Oh,
but
Lord.
Tuskegee is a shorthand for Black men in particular. So the whole narrative of Isaiah Bradley is kind of Marvel attacking this, which brings up once again our point from the first episode, which is that Marvel has always been political, because Stan Lee was a Jewish immigrant and he created a huge chunk of what we know as Marvel now. So that was always going to be interesting, and I was really fascinated to see what they were going to do. And Carl Lumley is an actor who I knew from Alias and I knew was up to this chop. So I was very excited to also see, just knowing Sam, these two different ways to be Black men. Yeah. And how that was going to work and what that was going to do. Also, Fandom Corner, because we don't really need to talk about it no, we do. We'll talk about trauma. At one point, Bucky gets arrested. Yes. And they have to go to couples therapy.
Yeah, it's after they meet Isaiah, because they get Isaiah. Like profiled.
Yes.
And then Bucky is the one that ends up getting arrested. Yeah.
Because he's essentially breaking parole by being a dick.
Yeah.
So, sure. So they end up in couples therapy, and there's a lot of, so many funny memes about like having to get closer and like how the two of them didn't break while they were doing that scene. I would
love the B-roll that made it to the floor of like all the takes
we got the extended Zemo dancing cut. Can we get the extended couples therapy cut? And supposedly there's an extended Bucky and Sarah cut, which I also really love because they filmed a lot of scenes where they were flirting, and I like that. So more behind the scenes.
Thank you.
I just said that really softly, and our editor is going to be so mad at me. I would like more behind the scenes things, please, because it's so much fun. Anyway, so at one point we finally get that Bucky's animating entity in this episode is that he finds Sam because he's fucking furious at him for giving up the shield.
Yeah, and it's one of the most revealing things about a character that I think Marvel's done in a small way. Like they've set up a lot of character reveals about these guys, and Marvel's really good, I think, in most ways of kind of revealing bits of character as they go along.
This was like, hello, let's crack open Bucky's entire soul.
Yeah, and for him to just look at Sam and be like, but if Steve was wrong about you, then that might make Steve wrong about me.
That was another one we paused, and I like doubled over.
Punched in the uterus.
Because I was like, first of all, how many of us have been in those kind of relationships?
Oh, yeah.
Like who is the person that is your like through line through trauma? If that person is wrong about something else, are they wrong about you too? And
and like, we could sit here and talk about how challenging it must be for Bucky and we get glimpses of it, and I hope we continue to as the show continues, or his character arc continues in whatever capacity, but we get these glimpses of what it's like to know that you did these things, that your body did them, that your person did them, and you have the memory of them, the physical memory of killing all those people. And
he tells Tony that he remembers killing his parents,
like doing horrible things, but like reconciling that with like it was me but it wasn't me, and this whole was it me because I'm a bad person, like was I
because the serum, because this is the other thing about the serum we should say, because this is a huge secret to John Walker, is that in Captain America the First Avenger, Erskine, who creates the serum, played expertly by Stanley Tucci. Erskine tells Steve over and over again that it only reveals what is already in you.
Yeah.
That Steve Rogers was an excellent Captain America because he wasn't a good soldier, but he was a good man. And we see the inverse with John Walker, that he was a good soldier and not necessarily a good man. I think he's like an average dude, but I don't think he's fundamentally wired to be good the way that Steve was fundamentally wired to be good, including committing treason in order to be good.
Yeah, and I think we don't want to jump ahead too far in this season, but I think Steve and John Walker were made soldiers by very, very different American governments.
Yes. Oh my gosh, great
mentalities and perspectives on what it is to be a soldier. And so I think that's the comparison we get. I think John Walker's a good man. I think he was made like by the army into the person that he became. And that gave him a whole perspective on what was right and what was wrong and what he was allowed to do.
But with the reason I brought that up with Bucky is that if he got the serum from Hydra, and this is what it brought out in him. He was already one of the best marksmen in the war, we're told.
Yeah.
So he was already excellent at killing things before Hydra gave him the shot. So it's like, is that part of this too?
Yeah.
Was I always going to be this person? And so that's really what that is. But I think I want to spend the rest of our time on Isaiah Bradley. Is there anything else? Okay.
Yeah, no,
Fandom Corner over. I just needed
to. Well, we definitely wanted to talk about that scene because, we spent a lot of time talking about trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We are all living through and transitioning out of or into a different part of a collective global trauma, very similarly to like something like the snap.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why it resonated so much with a lot of people on it in a way that they didn't think it would have, maybe parts of this story. And we don't know what was written pre-COVID, post-COVID, and whether they were always going to have this trauma element. I think they were, because they saw this as an opportunity to talk about what happened to Bucky in a way that like in the Avengers movies, they were always fighting things. And so you couldn't really spend a lot of time slowing it down to get into his internal trauma.
Much to my chagrin, personally, and many others. I am less excited by the blowing the things up and more excited by the humans.
But you know, that's what they wanted for the big,
exactly, and that's what makes money. God, like Mazel, that's fine.
The big screens and the smaller screens, we can do some smaller topic. Well, not smaller stories, bigger topics.
Yeah.
So yes, Isaiah. What I would like to say about it was, in my experience with Marvel in the films and some of the TV shows, I haven't watched all of the TV shows, but some of them, they're not so great at saying the difficult things always, especially about race. And what I loved about Isaiah Bradley was he came straight out and was like, why do you want to be Captain America? Why would you want this shield? What is America?
Why do you want to wear this flag? What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you? Let me tell you about my experience as a Black man. Let me tell you about what this country and this government did to me for wanting to be, to
and
fight.
has done to so many others.
And like, I'm so glad they went there, because obviously in this country, we've been having a lot of conversations. Again, we have these conversations a lot about race and equity and justice and systemic racism. And it was, they could have talked about only pieces of Isaiah Bradley, but they let him just kind of full throttle. And to juxtapose then him and Sam, who've had very different experiences and similar experiences as Black men in America, but fundamentally feel differently about it.
And the generational thing too.
And the generational difference. We were just like, if we had like lights, like carnival lights in our brains, I know we were both watching it and the carnival lights were just going like,
because one of the things that we find the most important about stories and movies is that that they can represent all the different ways to be human that we actually have and encounter in the world. And one of the issues with Marvel heretofore, and this is actually where I think the DC cinematic universe completely falls apart, is it presents only one category of ways to be human.
Right.
So the only women we see are this category of how to be women. It's one of the reasons I actually love that they made Pepper a mother. And like, there's this only category of ways to be man, and there's this is the only category of masculinity, and this is the only category of race. And what they've done in this, and they did in WandaVision too, even though we didn't watch WandaVision, which you will know if you saw some other coverage here on our YouTube channel. They trouble that narrative a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want more of that troubling. I like that troubling a lot, because it allows for me to see myself in some cracks that doesn't happen in some other media.
Yeah. And
so I really love that it was like, these are two completely valid experiences. Isaiah is judging Sam, rightfully so, based on Isaiah's life experience. The show is not judging either one of them. And that is really good craft making of how to hold these things in tension. And it's also allowing Bucky to just be like, oh, there's a lot I don't know. And he's just like baffled, which is a good look on, like, the right look for a white man of Bucky's ilk at that time.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, there's a lot I don't know. Got it. No problem. Like,
this is, yeah. But I think it's so fascinating that Bucky was the one that found out about Isaiah and was like, there's something you need to see. Like, and this confrontation that eventually that they get in the couples therapy, where Bucky is like, I don't understand why you don't, but like, you don't have all the information, so let me help you out. Yeah. And I think, and
in a way, I wonder too, if Bucky saw Sam as redeeming Isaiah's narrative, that this was another way where it's like, of course you have to take up the shield, because the last Black man that got it, this happened to him, but this time we won't let that happen.
Yeah.
It's different now. Knowing Bucky's vague martyr complex, I won't let that happen. Like that kind of thing, where all of that was happening in the back of his head. And I think that conversation was a COVID casualty.
Yes, it's possible. And we don't know what was lost to the COVID. And what I found so fascinating about that dynamic, and we get it several times throughout the rest of the series, is that it was the first time where we could kind of explore racial difference in the Marvel universe. Because we've had these people around. We've had Rhodey for a long time. and they never really touched on it. And I think for me, as you were talking about it, that the animating movement of the Avengers arc, that they had to get to Endgame. Like everything was putting pieces together
to get to Thanos,
to get to the confrontation over Thanos, to get to the snap and all of that, that I think they knew that's where they were going. And so they couldn't have bigger conversations or more thematic or character driven conversations aside from the ones that fit into the parts of moving that arc forward. I mean, we get a lot of personal conversations in Civil War and like the difference between Tony and Steve and how they see the world and how they see the fights and all this. And kind
Ultron
of
is obviously a very personal movie in terms of the Avengers.
Like
Ragnarok has personal conversations. Yeah,
we get them, but they're always kind of like, oh, we have some room for it while we're driving this.
And it's still in service to getting it to Thanos.
Yeah, because like if you don't have the conflict with Steve and Tony anyway, we won't dissect the entire Avengers arc. But I think for me, as you were talking, that like, it's like they have breathing room now. And that's really exciting for both of us because as we talked about in our episode 1 coverage, like this is a great opportunity. And, you know, any type of fantasy or sci-fi genre is always a great opportunity to have social commentary. And Marvel's done it in the movies-ish.
It's flirted with it, yeah.
It's flirted with it. But now, like, straight out the gate, they're coming in episodes 1 and 2 and saying, no, we're ready to have these conversations. So that's what I think was, aside from the not surprise and horror of learning what happened to Isaiah Bradley, because as we discussed, I have not read the comics. So I kind of catch up on things after I've watched the movie or watched the episode, and Dr. Kristen helped a lot with that. And so did Vulture with their Easter eggs assemble. But you know, I was really energized by the potential of that conversation. And that was, I think, my favorite. Sam reconciling Isaiah's feelings and his feelings about being Captain America is my favorite story arc in this season. It's just so exciting.
And how Sarah weaves in and out of that is really fascinating to me too.
Yeah.
I will say in terms of the dramaturgical structure, this is my favorite episode of the season. This is to me where they were firing on all cylinders and what it could have been without COVID.
I cackled at the like buddy comedy, like the scenes with Lamar and Discount Cap and Bucky and Sam and like the truck going back and forth and like all the banter and the snark was just chef's kiss.
It was, to me, this is the strongest episode of the season.
Yeah.
And we're about to go into for me, the most frustrating episode of the season. But an important one and a COVID casualty, and we'll get to that next time.
We'll see you then.